What's up, Planeswalkers? It's your boy K-Dog. We're back in Historic with a Sultai Mill. This one we're playing around with Enchantress's Presence and Teferi's Tutelage. So just kind of been playing around with Enchantress's Presence lately, and did some decks where really saw the power of how quickly you can just draw cards. And obviously combined with something like a Teferi's Tutelage, where when you draw cards, your opponent mills 2 cards, and you just chain a bunch of enchantments together. Seems like it could be a pretty powerful effect. But obviously, I feel like the power level is good enough to try it in Historic, and we need lots of interaction, of course, because your opponent's always doing bigger and better things than what you're trying to do. But if you can stop them from those things, or slow them down at least, then you can give yourself a chance to mill out your opponent. So not the biggest mill fan, but it's always kind of fun to play around with it every once in a while, just to try to do something a little bit different, especially when it's not the way that everybody else is trying to maybe mill out. So yeah, 2 Enchantress's Presence and 3 Tutelage, so we can make room for some of our other stuff. So we got Omen of the Sea here. Obviously it's an enchantment that's going to trigger our Enchantress's Presence and just draws cards by itself while scrying at the same time. And of course you can sack it to scry additionally as well, since we're a mill deck where you're all about the late game. So having this to scry in the late game is pretty fantastic. Search for Azcanta is super powerful in any kind of a control style deck, and it's an enchantment as well, so it works extremely well with what we're trying to do here. Basically, we have to surveil at the beginning of our upkeep every turn, and once we flip it with 7 or more cards in our graveyard, we can tap it for blue mana, or we can pay 3 and tap it to search our 4 cards to pull any non-creature, non-land card from among them. And since we're running no creatures in our list, then we should be able to hit this pretty consistently. We're doing some interaction, but since we're in Sultai and we're doing this kind of mill thing, and we're trying to also play a bunch of enchantments, we need flexible removal. So instead of like Tyrant Scorns and Eliminates and things like that, we're going to run Assassin's Trophy. You want to make sure that we have a strong game 1 against pretty much any deck that we're coming up against. There's pretty thin line, pretty thin margin for a mill strategy, and so you can't afford to just lose game 1 because your opponent's doing like a mid-range or a control style list, and you're playing a bunch of creature hate, and you don't have ways to interact with their planeswalkers. So we want to run Assassin's Trophy to destroy any permanent on our opponent's side. They do get to search for a land, which isn't necessarily a big deal, but it can be obviously if they're doing like the Ugin thing, which is obviously a popular strategy. We have sideboard answers to kind of help us out with those kind of things as well. I was running 3 of Maelstrom Pulse. It's basically the same thing as Trophy, only it's a sorcery speed. It's 3 mana, and we also get to destroy all other permanents with the same name as that permanent. There's obviously lots of linear strategies in Historic you're going to come up against. So sometimes it's just a 3 mana kill something, which is pretty reasonable for what we're trying to do here. But in certain matchups, you can kill 2-3 things with this, so that's pretty fantastic. Neutralize here, it's a counterspell that cycles as well. Obviously cycling draws a card, triggers your Tutelage, or you just counter a spell. And since we're pretty heavily invested in blue, we don't mind this fact this is a double blue and colorless spell. And then this gives us some game against those kind of mid-range and control decks as well. And if we're up against aggro, we can just cycle it and try to find some of our sweepers and that sort of thing. We've got 2 Ashiok's Erasure as additional kind of a counter spell, but also lets us exile basically any spell. So we can exile a Thought Erasure, a Thought Seize, a Planeswalker, any spell. It's pretty sweet. And then once we do that, then our opponent can't cast any more spells with that name. So that's pretty fantastic. Basically like Ixalan's Binding at flash speed that can target instants and sorceries as well. It's pretty tons of upside. Of course, it is an enchantment, so your opponent can't interact with it, so that is that downside. But overall, I feel like it's pretty worth it because we're on this kind of enchantment plan. 1 Extinction Event and 2 Languish. Didn't get any Languishes in the Jumpstart event, so I had to craft these 2, but I didn't want to necessarily craft more than that, so that's why I'm running the 1 Extinction Event. Because they're going to make a case that Extinction Event is worth running here as well, but probably 3 Languish would be ideal if you had them, or you have access to them. Probably just a better sweeper all around. Doing the -4/-4, obviously much better than Ritual of Soot or anything like that, and obviously we don't have access to Wrath of God or Shatter, the really top of the end sweepers, so Languish is kind of the next best thing. We also have 4 Vraska's Contempt. We want to get to the late game, so getting the life is going to buy us a little bit of time. Exile can be pretty impactful in certain matchups, and creatures or planeswalkers having that flexibility is pretty fantastic as well. We're running a couple planeswalkers here, 1 Tamiyo and 1 of the new Jace, Unraveler of Secrets. Tamiyo's passive is actually pretty important in certain matchups. Your opponent can't force you to sacrifice or discard, which is pretty sweet. And you can +1 to dig for any of your combo pieces if you're looking for a sweeper, your Enchantress's Presence, your Tutelage, counterspell, whatever the case may be. You can just +1, look for that. Or if you've already cast a sweeper and need to get it back to do it again, you can -3, and get that sweeper back out of your graveyard to potentially recast it. If you lose your Tamiyo, so be it. Planeswalkers are nice that way because they can kind of protect your life total, because now your opponent has to attack their creatures into your Planeswalker and instead of your life total. Same thing kind of here with Jace. 5 mana, 5 loyalty, +1 to scry and draw a card, which is pretty sweet. Obviously anything that draws those cards works well with the tutelage. We can -2 to bounce a creature back to its owner's hand, so just kind of tempo our opponent. Certainly worth it. And then the -8 is pretty crazy if you can get to that point. Being able to counter your opponent's first spell every turn is pretty sweet. A couple patient rebuildings here. It's an enchantment that also mills. Beginning of upkeep, your opponent mills 3 cards, and then you draw a card for each land put in their graveyard this way. So 3 cards, you're probably going to hit 1 or 2 lands with this pretty consistently. So that's an extra 1 or 2 cards you're going to draw. And of course, that counts as card draw for your Teferi's tutelage, and it's enchantment which triggers your Enchantress's presence. So tons of synergy there. 2 Eldest Reborn, super powerful card from Dominaria. When it comes down, your opponent has to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker, and then they have to discard a card, and then we get a creature or planeswalker back from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So it's very similar on power level to Elspeth Conqueror's Death. However, your opponent gets to choose what they sacrifice, and doesn't go to exile, but then your opponent does have to discard a card, so could potentially put something back that you can get back with stage 3. And we just have the 2 planeswalkers ourselves, so not too worried about that. So being able to hit our opponent's graveyard is super important. So we can just get back a creature just to protect our life total, or we can get back one of our opponent's planeswalkers, and just kind of do some nasty stuff with that. Especially when we go to sideboard and we can kind of get that stuff out of their hand in the early turns, post sideboard, with Thought Seizes and things like that. Then yeah, it can be pretty powerful. Mana base here. We have Ipnu Rivulet, obviously the Amonkhet remastered lands. Those deserts are super sweet. Some of my favorite land cycle that we've had, at least in recent times. Just a lot of different utility with these different deserts, and Ipnu Rivulet is pretty powerful for what it does. Obviously, we're a slow mill deck, so we don't want to be paying a ton of life. So just running the 1 copy here, because you can pay. You can add blue mana at the cost of 1 life, and we don't really want to do that too much, any more than we have to. So just 1 copy here. But the reason to run it is to pay 1 in blue, sack a desert to target player, mill 4 cards. Having a land that can mill your opponent 4 cards is pretty fantastic. So this can be the potentially the final straw to mill your opponent's last 4 cards. Maybe they scried and kept some cards on top. Well, you can just Ipnu Rivulet and bottom those cards. So yeah. Couple islands, 1 swamp, 1 forest, 4 Temple of Deceit, 4 Watery Grave, 3 Overgrown Tomb, 2 Temple of Malady, 3 Breeding Pool, and then all 4 of these charms. Make sure we have all the fixing. And also being able to cycle this in the late game, since we are a late game deck. Sideboard, 2 Grafdigger's Cage is a must, 2 Negates, 2 Tail's End. Really think this is a little bit underrated sideboard tech against Shark Typhoon. Is a super powerful and popular card to play, and this negates that among other things. It can even counter your opponent activating their planeswalker and things like that. So yeah, just lots of utility on the Tail's End, and also being able to obviously counter planeswalkers, which is similar to what we're trying to do with Tail's End anyway. And then 1 more Neutralize also to help out with those matchups. Barrier Breach, mostly against Shrines, but any other deck that might be heavy on enchantments. Obviously the Azorius Aura list is pretty popular. Not as much in best of 3, but certainly does see some play. A couple Ashioks here. Pretty nice passive here that can be relevant in certain matchups. But mostly we're just trying to -1, mill 4 cards, and then exile our opponent's graveyard. We're not main decking because we're all kind of all in on enchantments, but it's just going to come in just when we need it to exile our opponent's graveyard. Plenty of strategies that rely on that. I've seen some, obviously, Embalm, Internalize decks. Uro alone makes this card certainly worth looking at. And, just various graveyard synergies and things like that. Obviously, the Rakdos, Pyromancer, Croxo list. Lots of different powerful decks that you need. You have to have graveyard interaction. A couple of Ritual of Soots. There's lots of monocolored lists that have lots of 1, 2, and 3 drops. Obviously, Pride Mates can go super big and then get out of Languish range very quickly. So Ritual of Soot just doesn't care about how big it is. It just cares about the casting cost, Yorvo and things like that as well, and can just wipe your opponent's board clean. 1 Thought Distortion for those control heavy matchups. There's a fair number of control decks that just want to draw a lot of cards and play that draw go game. Well, this can't be countered, and we exile all those cards from their hand, non-creature. Of course, so if it is a Dream Trawler, Uro, Ulamog, things like that, we don't hit those, but we hit everything else. So get rid of the counter spells, their planeswalkers, and everything like that. Nezahal, just kind of a personal preference here. You can definitely slot in something else if you don't have it. You haven't been playing some Ixalan or whatever. It's a 7 mana, 7/7 from Ixalan block. It can't be countered, so that obviously works well against the control matchups. You have no maximum hand size, so if you're set up pretty well in the late game and just kind of a Drago game, well, you don't care about your maximum hand size with your Enchantress presence. You can draw tons of cards, and whenever your opponent casts a non-creature spell, you get to draw a card. Of course, works well with our Teferi's Tutelage. We can discard 3 cards to exile and return the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. So basically, if your opponent tries to kill it, we can just discard 3 lands or whatever we don't need and protect it from potential removal. So obviously, if you don't have this card, don't worry about crafting it. It's not super important. You can just put in whatever card you feel like is worth running, depending on the matchups that you tend to face off against. So that's the list. We'll jump into some matches, see how it goes. All right, begins boy. So we're gonna play this in rank because I've had some decent success with it there. Obviously, it's not super powerful, but if you can kind of get some stuff lined up for you, then this can definitely put in some work. Alright, seems pretty solid. We got a couple counter spells and a presence. Obviously, it kind of sucks for up against aggro. Don't really have much removal. Languish. We have 2 swamps, or 2 black sources, so yeah. Definitely can keep that. There's no reason to show them the green yet. Turn 1 swamp. Golgari. Sultai maybe? We'll hold on to the Neutralize. They could have something that we don't necessarily want to see. Should put a forest there in presence. We'll just hold up and we'll actually just hold open the Neutralizer. Not really sure what I want to discard. Oh, it's a Sapperlings deck in ranked play queue. Sweet. Let's get the presence online, so we're going to leave ourselves open here, but that's fine. Alright, so now we definitely know we want to keep this Languish. Ashiok Treasure is okay. I do want to play lands. It's kind of weird that they're in Sapperlings, but I haven't really played anything here. We could just discard the Omen of the Sea. It's nice, but it's not like super impactful. Huh. Triome. Do we want the scry, or do we want to have all the colors? We'll Languish. Still don't know what our opponent is up to. They played Slimefoot, but nothing else. I think we'll just scry here. We have 5 mana open for Eldest Reborn next turn, or we can just hold open Ashiok's Erasure as well. Trophy. Yeah, we'll take removal. Maybe they just kept a really terrible hand. Alright. Eldest Reborn doesn't really do much against Tendershoot Drive, so that's kind of lame. We'll go and fire this off. Don't want them getting that free value, especially they're approaching. As they're approaching City's Blessing, 10 or more permanents. Alright, so all we have is Omen of the Sea here, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Then we have a 1/1 out, so. Alright, definitely wish we had kept that Languish, but we have another one in the deck. A very weird start from our opponent to play Sapperlings and have so little board presence. Typically they just spam lots of cheaper creatures. We get another Tendershoot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and with the token they will have the City's Blessing. So we definitely need a sweeper here. So now we pass through our opponent's end step when we wanted to cast that on their turn. So now we're starting at 6/8. We'll bottom the island. We'll keep the Contempt to get rid of this Dryad. They have plenty of sacrifice fodder for these Eldest Reborns. Alright, so make another 1-1. And I think we want to play this out. I mean, we're at 21. And we've gotten rid of 2 Tendershoot Dryads. It's a 5-drop, so I'm not sure how many they're running. If they were that slow to play, they could be running all 4. Yeah, super weird game so far. We could play a Eldest Reborn just to force some discards since they're keeping a lot of cards in hand, but I'm guessing they're just lands. I'm not sure what else that would be. There could be removal too, since we're not playing creatures or planeswalkers. Could have just kept a hand with a couple of removal spells. Fungal Infection's pretty mediocre. If we have another Tendershoot, we can exile. Not worried about a Deathbloom Thallid. Alright, down to 1 card in hand, so it's got to be either a land or a kill spell. But we'll get rid of that. Exile, we're going to gain some life. Sure. Yeah, Death Sprout your own creature just to get a land, and so we don't gain some life. Makes sense. Doesn't go to exile, so you also get the 1-1. Yeah, we'll scry. Resetting the board with a sweeper would be nice. I guess we'll keep the Contempt. Let's go for the Eldest Reborn. They're in top deck mode, not really doing a whole lot. Ipnu Rivulet. It's not a bad draw. So they lose a token. It could make a difference, but we'll get something back here in a couple turns. So unless they have some big Anthem effect to blow us out. So we got them down to less than half the cards left. Hitting us for 3. You got it. You gonna keep it in hand just to discard it? Maelstrom Pulse. Apparently they didn't read Eldest Reborn. Sure. Jace, why not? Oh, plus. Get that mill action. Patient Rebuilding. I mean, how worried are we about our life total? We'll keep. Alright, we got Tendershoot Dryad out of the way. So we're shields down here for another turn, but maybe they'll swing at our Jace here. And Maelstrom Pulse on Jace. Okay, well, we can get it back if we want. We also have the City's Blessing, so we could just get back their Tendershoot Dryad, which seems pretty solid. Tamiyo. Presence is nice, but I'd rather be safe and just have another sweeper effect. Okay, they're down to 18, so we're pretty close to getting them. And now we got a 3-3. Oh, and they just draw land. Perfect. Can't even attack no more. Can't even attack no more. Do we proc our Rivulets? They're pretty close. Let's hold on. Let's hold on. So they have a lot of Maelstrom Pulses. It's good to know. 8 cards left, so we're not quite there. Actually, Eldest Reborn, is that going to be enough to trigger? Let's see, we're going to draw a couple cards. So we're down to 6. We can mill 4, they're down to 2, so not quite. Go ahead and fire this off just to make sure they don't have any hope of success. And Temple to scry. No more lands, please. Sure, we'll attack for 2, not that it matters. And get a 3-3. It's a land. So our opponent is dead here. Sweet. A very awkward start from our opponent with the not really doing much there. And yeah, we got them. Taking down the mighty Saplings. Alright, so obviously Ritual of Soot can hit their tokens pretty hard. Tamiyo feels pretty vulnerable. Eldest Reborn. Probably just cut them all together. Ritual. Alright, let's take a look at their list one more time. Alright, so we got some Death Sprouts, don't care about that. Maelstrom Pulse can hit our enchantments, which we don't like. They're just super slow. That's kind of weird. They don't really do a whole lot. They have all these sapling migrations, you know, something for early turns, but it doesn't seem like it's enough to put early pressure on your opponent. Death Sprout seems a little expensive for what they're trying to do. I mean, if they're trying to get to 5 for Tendershoot Drought, I guess, maybe. Village Rites they can do in response to our removal, but if we're playing sweepers, then that's fine. Yeah, we want to definitely protect our enchantments from their pulses. Let's see, we took out both Eldest Reborns already, so we're at 61. What else do we want to take out here? Shave one more thing off. I guess Omen's always kind of expendable. It's nice, but it's not like necessarily super impactful. I mean, they have that one card that interacts with the graveyard, but I'm not too worried about that. It should be fine. I don't have enough legendaries to bring in Tail's End. I don't think it's worth countering any abilities. We could counter the Tendershoot Dryad making a token, but it doesn't really seem worth it because it's on each player's upkeep. It's going to be hard to keep up. Yeah, double Island is pretty bad. We'll bottom one Omen. Temple of Malady. Alright, Triome. Hope we get another land. It is a land. Perfect. Alright, so looking for Enchantress' presence on turn 3, hopefully. They get their Lord on turn 2. So this is a much better start from our opponent. Do we want to kill that? Maybe. Probably. We'll leave open the possibility. We can Omen or Trophy here. Obviously, rather save the Trophy for after presence. Deathbloom Thallid. We'll go ahead and kill that. We've already shocked in, so let's try to preserve our life total, especially since it's an Anthem effect. And they're obviously going to have to do a little better start this turn, this game. Going first and everything like that. Let's see if they want to take a turn off to kill our presence. Or if they want to add more saplings to the board. So Maelstrom Pulse obviously works great against saplings. Scavenging Ooze. Oh, we got rid of our Eldest Reborn, so don't really care too much about that. They can hit us for 6 here. Do we care? Love to find a sweeper here. Land, not quite. I think we just Omen to try to dig for like a Languish or something. Even settle for a Contempt just to gain some life. Okay. I mean, that does keep us from flipping a search for Azcanta, so that's something to keep in mind. Oh, they just clicked through their combat step? Wow. Yikes. Yikes, opponent. Alright, we're going to fill up their graveyard, potentially. Scavenging Ooze, number 2. Looking for a sweeper here. We have 4 lands plus a swamp in hand, so we're not too worried about that. There's a Languish. Let's fire that off. Clutch. Yeah, you can get rid of one thing. Could have gained some life there, but Fungal Rebirth. So that's pretty cute. one card in hand. It's a Maelstrom Pulse on Enchantress's Presence. There's Contempt. Obviously, we'd love to save this as Pulse to hit all these saplings. Let's fire this off. You want to gain some life? Alright, so they're exiling our graveyard, so we're going to have a hard time flipping this Azcanta, but we still get the Surveil effects every turn. That's certainly reasonable. Obviously, the upside of flipping an Azcanta is what makes it so good, but our opponent using their ooze to good effect here. We'll go ahead and fire this off. And search. And Temple. Rivulet's okay, but we need some more action here to try to dig. Obviously want to get rid of that. Alright, get a 1/1. Ashiok's Erasure. I guess we'll keep. Just have the negate open right now. Okay. Just land from our opponent. We'll graveyard that. Lands. Okay, so we have a couple counters open and the scry on Omen. We're at 12. We'll just negate, and then we can scry. Negate only hits non-creatures. Ashiok's Erasure hits anything. Right, scry 2. Fill up our graveyard. Library. Definitely want the Vraska's Contempt. Pass the turn. Land. Alright, we're getting super lucky here. I'm not going to fire off a Contempt on a little 1/1 sapling. I want to get some card draw online, so we're going to go ahead and fire this off. We are shields down here, but we're going to try it. Feels bad after they top deck a couple lands there. Kind of figured they were going to draw something. Sucks it was a Maelstrom Pulse, but it is what it is. They do fill up our graveyard for the Azcanta flip. Unless they could get rid of the trophy. Sapling Migration. I guess we can erasure that. Take one more down to 8. And we'll activate Azcanta. Take a ritual. Take a ritual. Ooh, Tutelage. Alright, so if we draw a land here, and we can discard that. We want to keep Neutralize, Contempt, and Soot. It is a land. I don't love discarding a tri-land, but we do have our mill package online. Not going to fire a ritual for a 1/1. We're at 8, so we're okay for now. Tendershoot Dryad. We'll let that resolve. And we'll Contempt it. I gained a life there. We still have Neutralize for whatever. And we milled another. Yeah, we'll play the line. Milled another Tendershoot. So they're pretty low on those. Yeah, try to hit one of my enchantments with your Maelstrom Pulse. I'll say no. Alright, Azcanta, give me something good. I'll take a Jace. Just want to draw some cards here. Ooh, Patient Rebuilding too. More Patient Rebuilding. And say go. So we have mana open for Azcanta again. A Death Bloom. It's a 3-drop. So we're taking 1. We can Ritual. And they just have a 1/1 from the Death Bloom Thawed die. Take the presence. We're looking for some card draw here. Another Azcanta. Ooh, we can. Alright, play Presence. Play Ritual. I got a 1/1. We'll play the Azcanta, and have to just be careful not to actually flip it. Just to get another card draw. And we get to Surveil every turn, so we're not going to complain about that. We're at 7, so we got to be real careful about our life total. Alright, Yavimaya. Jace can bounce that back, but then they get another 1/1. It's not ideal. Graveyard that. Decline. We already have a flipped Azcanta, so we don't want to do anything crazy. Alright. Maelstrom Pulse on the Saplings. And Jace can bounce that just to protect our life total a little bit. 12 cards in hand. So we could have plussed a draw that would have got rid of a couple things. Not sure we're too worried about that. I think we can get them. Pretty sure we can get them here. Alright, so we're going to mill a couple more cards here. Bottom land, we'll keep Maelstrom. Alright, this is going to mill a bunch. Yeah, absolutely want that. Decline. And that should be game. Exactly, perfect. We can just plus Extinction Event. Say the 3-drop. And then we'll exile that as well. We could trophy the Mortar Vine, but yeah. Alright, we can get there. Sweet. Pretty dream showing of the deck right there. Alright, got a card to celebrate. Sweet. So obviously this super slow decks, I don't necessarily want to do one more game because it just can take a little bit too long. So yeah, I feel like the list is pretty solid. Like I said, Languish could be a 3 of, but Extinction Event can certainly put in work in certain situations with the exile. So maybe 2 and 1 is right. Just to kind of have that option for some exile. I mean, we do have the Contempt as well when we really need the exile removal. Tamiyo and Jace are kind of whatever, not super critical, but they do definitely supplement our plan. And sometimes just having a Planeswalker to kind of distract your opponent can be worth it. And of course we have the Eldest Reborn, which can kind of get them back. We can get some additional value, especially after we do, you know, sweep the board and that sort of thing. Yeah, but the synergy between Tutelage and Presence is super sweet. And being Sultai colors, you just have lots of different access to lots of powerful spells, counter spells, removal, things like that. So that's why running Trophy and Maelstrom Pulse to just kill anything on our opponent's side is pretty sweet. Obviously, Trophy lets your opponent dig for a basic land, but there are some greedy mana bases that have very few, if any, even basics. You know, we see like 5-color shrines and other shenanigans like that. We can punish those decks pretty hard if they're not running basic lands. So just a 2-mana kill anything. And being able to hit lands too can be pretty important. You know, Castle Ardenvale, Castle Lockdown, whatever, stuff like that. You know, if your opponent's running Search for Azcanta, obviously if you recall the vampires, the Danto, that flip land, Danto the first fort, I believe. Obviously things like that. Having ways to deal with that. Since we're not running Field of Ruin because we're trying to keep our mana base as consistent as possible. So no room for Field of Ruins. Ipnu Rivulet is kind of our maybe our one utility land. So it's kind of hard to really justify Field of Ruin in this list, but then Assassin's Trophy also kind of fills that role. It kind of does everything for us, so it definitely feels like it's pretty impactful. And Maelstrom Pulse hits any online permanent as well, with just enough sweepers, some exile and life gain removal. So I feel like we have just enough pieces that you're going to have a chance in any given matchup, and we have some nice sideboard options against the more control and mid-range style of lists as well. And yeah, obviously Nezahal, like I said, just kind of a personal preference for me. But if you don't have it, yeah, obviously put in whatever tech you want. You know, Davrio, or you know, whatever thing you think you need more game against. We have plenty of counter spells here, so we're not running like the Thoughtseize or things like that, because we don't want to necessarily be paying life, and I'd rather just kind of have the negate and counter spell plays, because sometimes if your opponent's like in top deck mode, then obviously discard spells in the late game like that are pretty worthless. But there's usually, your opponent is usually running some kind of a, you know, non-creature spell removal for your enchantments or planeswalkers or something like that. So I feel like these are just more valuable, and plus we don't necessarily want to be paying life either. And then Barrier Breach, it just feels like we need a little bit, even though we have, you know, Trophy and Pulse that can hit like enchantments. I feel like having something that can hit the Shrines deck pretty hard is it's pretty clutch. And then also, you know, it has Cyclone on it as well, so if you don't need it, if the Pulse has been able to kind of hold them at bay, or trophies and things like that, you can just cycle this away and you know, draw a card, things like that. But yeah, overall this list has felt pretty solid to me. Not the biggest fan of Mill, but it's fun to kind of play around with some different strategies every once in a while. And yeah, had a lot of fun with this list. Done well for me in ranked. So thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, make sure you jank with purpose.